The federal government has moved to end the practice of carrying electricity subsidy costs alone, and it has announced a framework that will spread the burden across federal, state, and local governments from 2026. According to the Director General of the Budget Office of the Federation, Tanimu Yakubu, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had directed that electricity subsidy costs be made explicit, tracked, and fairly shared across tiers of government, warning that the current approach creates hidden liabilities and recurring crises in the power market. He added that from 2026, the federal government will no longer treat electricity subsidies as an open-ended obligation borne solely by the center, especially where policy decisions and political benefits are shared. Yakubu stressed that the policy was not designed as a sanction, but as a mechanism to align incentives across government and support efficiency in the power sector. In the meantime, the federal government is estimated to have spent in excess of 7 trillion naira on the power sector since 2013, when it privatized it to improve electricity supply in Nigeria. Despite this huge spending, however, the country is still not close to enjoying regular power supply. Twice within the month of 2026, major cities in the country were thrown into a blackout owing to the loss of electricity supply from the national grid. In the course of the previous administrations, power generation at a time dropped to as low as 1,800 megawatts, while transmission and distribution channels were also beset with serious challenges owing to obsolete equipment. While Nigeria's power woes predate 1999, the return of democracy had brought hope that the sector will be rejuvenated when liberalized for private investors to pump in money to provide electricity for its huge population. Beks Dagogo-Jack is a civil engineer, technocrat, entrepreneur, and civil servant who once advised President Goodluck Jonathan on power sector matters and indeed served as chairman, Presidential Task Force on Power. He joins me now on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Good to see you, Engineer Beks Dagogo-Jack. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ruben. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. I mean, you were part of that process, the NIPP projects, the Presidential Committee on Power, the whole process of 2013, setting up the NERC and all of that background. Now, where did we get it wrong? We've not seen any improvement since that time. And in fact, people are now saying that the problem started from the Jonathan period because the privatization that was done, I think 18 assets, Gencos, transmission belonged exclusively to the federal government, and then you had the discos, I think 11 discos, generally, about 18 of them. And you were one of the architects of that process. And now people are saying the privatization that was done in 2013, 2014 must be revisited so that we can have a better dispensation. So that looks like a direct indictment of what you and your colleagues at that time did. Can you defend yourself or make a case or admit that indeed you got it wrong with the NERC process?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Abati. And thanks for giving me this opportunity to have this conversation with you. I think a lot of people misunderstood what happened between 2010 and 2014. A lot of people have also chosen to politicize and to also slant the narrative in the directions of their choice. Now, for somebody who was there, I would like to tell you that the time between 2010 and 2014, when Goodluck Ebele Jonathan's administration anchored the power sector reform, was the period in which we were able to migrate, or if you like, progress from about 2,000 megawatts nationwide generation capacity, and we got past the 5,000 megawatts threshold December of 2012 with 300 megawatts of spinning reserve, just in case we have challenges of grid collapses. It was by 2014 we have constructed, commissioned, available power generation capacity well past the 10,000 megawatts threshold. Now, to classify this as a failure is strange to me, because when we got 5,000 megawatts on the grid, what we did was go and recover lost capacities in the system. We're talking about Egbin, we're talking about Afam, we're talking about Sapele, we're talking about going down to, we're talking about the hydros, all of which are degraded very badly, and the program brought them back and were able to give Nigerians 5,000 megawatts of electricity from 2,000. The same 5,000 we are still talking about 10 years after. Just to give you a sense of how much work was done. Now let me backtrack a little bit. Now when Goodluck Ebele Jonathan came in 2010, he did what most leaders even now have not done. If you recall, Obasanjo was the Minister of Petroleum, and he appointed a Minister of State for Petroleum. President Buhari was Minister of Petroleum, and he appointed Minister of State. Our dear President now is the Minister of Petroleum, and he has Minister of State. Ebele Jonathan, President Jonathan, did what most people didn't expect that he would do. He took the Ministry of Power and appointed a Minister of State, Architect Nuyuwaya, as the Minister of State Power. I call that ownership. So there was ownership of the challenge to transform the power narrative in Nigeria. He didn't stop there. He created two special purpose vehicles. First was the Presidential Task Force on Power, chaired by Professor Naji, later on chaired by me. Between these two, in that dispensation, the journey of the reform was laid out. Clearly, dimensionable, measurable, that today we'll be here, tomorrow we'll be there, the next day we'll be there. All the metrics were laid out there. The deliverables were stated there. The dependencies were stated there. We had to do this together. It was a clear journey that anybody who is faithful can move from place to place. He created another special purpose vehicle, Presidential Action Committee on Power, which he chaired, to show that he was committed. This is his baby. Now, in that committee, we had all the ministries that had any kind of relationship with the power challenge. So we have finance there, we have labor there, we have, if you like, water resources there. We have virtually everybody. Now,
Hello, engineer.
lose somebody.
Beks Dagogo? Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, so where was I by way of narrative? But I'm just saying that President Goodluck Jonathan gave a very strong communication that he owns the reform program. He set agenda and set institutions to deliver on it. That's why between 2010 and 2014, we could do so much and people were thinking it was magic. Okay. Can you imagine getting the Nigerian Labour Congress to come on board the reform, sign up to severance pay package, okay, implement it, and have all the labor issues removed before the privatization?
Dagogo-Jack.
So, yes.
No, you have not answered my question.
Yes.
I said, so where did we get it wrong? Okay. This electricity power sector reform started even with the Obasanjo administration in 2005.
Correct.
Then subsequently, NEPA became PACN. We used to talk in those days about the unbundling of NEPA. Then President Jonathan came, created 18 successor companies that I referred to earlier. Then President Buhari came. He said he was doing something, a special presidential committee on power And then the Siemens project, that did not yield any result. Then President Tinubu came, he said, oh, power supply is a priority. In fact, there was a president under whom Chief Bola Ige, I think it was under Obasanjo, said the problem will be solved in 6 months. Under President Buhari, Minister Fashola also said, oh, 6 months will take care of this problem. Then you have President Tinubu there now. He's also now introduced a lot of reforms. He has promised 25,000 megawatts. He has talked about metering program. Everybody just talking, but we have not moved beyond 5,000 megawatts. The grid is perpetually collapsing. Where is the problem? Can you put your finger on it? Is it distribution or transmission or generation? Or the privatization that was done under the Jonathan government? Some people say the privatization model has failed. That in fact we should have full privatization, not partial privatization.
Dr. Abati, putting a finger on where the problem is oversimplifying a very complex situation. As of 2013, all the legacy companies were handed over to the private sector. That is like 50% of the reform journey. By 2014, they were all beginning to take over their assets. They are learning the market rules. They are getting fitted into the industry that they've come into, local to Nigeria, wherever they were coming from. And so before they could even, when they are on the marks, before they're ready to take the race, that tenure has ended. Nobody would probably project that Billy Jonathan would lose that election, but it's an election, that's the result. Elections have consequences. So anybody who came after Goodluck ought to sit down on the reform and say, where are we? What did we get wrong? What should we do? What should we throw out of the window? Nothing of the sort happened. As chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Power, by 2013, going 2014, I had cause to review the original roadmap that was launched 2010, because some of the realities have shifted a little bit, even within in the same administration. And we came up with new models, new parameters to guide us. This is how you run a reform race. But in 2015, the issue was to make a point that the reform was a mistake. It was ill-intentioned. People who are not qualified have been given the assets. It was more of rhetoric, not helpful to the reform. And while that was happening, the market situation was running out of control, spinning out of control. Liabilities were burgeoning up everywhere across the sector. Discipline had been thrown out of the window. A reformed electricity sector is looked after by the regulator, not by the Ministry of Power. In fact, the Ministry of Power by 2015 had become both the regulator and the ministry, and the regulator NEC had become a subsidiary of the Ministry of Power. What do you think investors will do looking at that kind of scenario? Nobody will come near with any kind of risk money. Even the owners of the assets, knowing what has happened in 2015 going forward, would not even try to bring in more capital to invest in the assets that they bought, because anything can change. You've sent a signal that you're not interested in the reform. How do you expect people to go and do that? Now, discourse became more relaxed. There are no consequences. Their licenses were not at stake. I strolled into the ministry one of those days, within 2 years, maybe 2016. Almost all these discos and gencos, their leaders, their CEOs were in the ministry trying to see the PAMSEC or see the minister. I shook my head. I knew that something had gone wrong. The regulator is supposed to be the point of reference of a market-determined sector, a market-driven sector. Now, those are some of the dysfunctions, and we can spend 2 days talking about this dysfunction. But it has spiraled out of order. We should be looking at how to solve it.
Engineer Dagogo-Jack. Look, there are persons, industry stakeholders, who hold the view that from the very beginning, the federal government should not have retained a 40% stake in the successor companies. Well, transmission is 100%. That is in the distribution companies. And now the federal government does not meet its own obligations. And we have a legacy debt of, they say, 4 trillion naira debt. But if you calculate from March 2025, it's over 6 trillion now in terms of debt. They've been talking about some bonds that they are issuing. But even that, in my view, raising about 587 billion to settle debts will not go far. Now, this administration has come up with the view that now subsidy has to be shared with state governments and also local governments because of the benefits that those subnationals get. But that would be in contravention of sections 162, 163, and 164 of the 1999 Constitution, because whatever accrues to the federation account belongs to the federation, not to the federal government. How are they going to force state governments? Some of these state governments can't even find their bearing, despite all the projections in the Electricity Act of 2023. So do you recommend that the federal government should get out of the electricity sector from generation to transmission to distribution, and that states should not be involved in having to pay for subsidies?
You have raised two issues, but my simple answer to your question about why federal government should keep 40% at the first wave of privatization is a misunderstanding of how such transactions are managed. Because when you manage a reform and you want to take government out of business, you don't go 100%. You want to retain some kind of control and continue to babysit the reform until it gets to the cruising height, and then you can sell. The government also has an obligation to the Nigerian populace to democratize ownership of these assets that are being transferred. So if tomorrow the government decides to put the 40% on the stock market, even you and I can buy 100 shares of these companies. There is a positive value in that model. But you talked about state government's liability on tariff, on the subsidy. I can tell you that just reasoning ordinarily, nothing too scientific. Today, if you look at unpaid debts, you will see like 40-30% of it accruable to both the federal government and the state governments in all the 36 state governments all over the place. They are part of the liquidity challenges. They will not pay their bills, and they will argue that they are federal government and you too cannot cut off the electricity. So if you want to be justiciable, who are the major culprits of this burgeoning debt? You will see the state governments all over the place. So when it's time to pay, it's not when they will pretend that they are not part of the problem that federal government should carry all the burden. So it doesn't really make sense to me. And then if you look further down, you will see that for us to make progress, President Tinubu has done the right thing by saying, let us remove power from the exclusive list. Now, that alone in itself as a policy, fantastic. But how to mechanize it, operationalize it, and bring results out of it is where I go back to the original narrative I gave you. Who owns that process? Who is the owner of that process? There was an owner of the process when we started in 2010. And he felt liable to certain results. I cannot see that strong ownership around the power sector, apart from great policies and great acts and so. Where is the ownership? Where can we go there and get things questioned and get answers and move on? And why are wrong things being developed into the system? Why is the regulator? Anywhere else is the regulator. And then you talked about 100% across board. It has never happened anywhere. Go to India, the transmission segment is like 80% government, a few private sector. Go to Brazil, go to Mexico, go to Poland, go everywhere. I'm calling people who are developing economies, so you won't say that they are first world economies. So transmission is not left within government for nothing. There's so many reasons for it. But when you talk about subsidy, you even send the wrong signals. All of these countries are subsidizing. But what is the subsidy model? Here we are subsidizing electricity theft. Here we are subsidizing 40 years old substations that have not received any maintenance forever. We are subsidizing the wrong things. If we have a very strong regulator, it will make sure that the wrong things are made right. But we've subdued him under the Ministry of Power, and he can't do much. So we are subsidizing the wrong things. We should subsidize cross-subsidy. Charge people who can pay, and let them pay a lot. The industries, wherever, abroad, wherever, what they do is to cross-subsidize. Get the money from the rich and bring it down. So there are a lot of misconceptions that need to be corrected.
Dagogo-Jack. Okay, you said, yes. Get money from people who can pay. I think it was in that regard that the government of the day decided to have band A, band B, band whatever, up to E. That has not worked, because even that segmentation of tariffs has not worked. Even if you're on band A, there's no guarantee that you will have electricity. Some homes don't even have meters. We had a metering program, it never worked. The grid has collapsed 2 times this year. It collapsed December 28th, 3 times within 1 month. So nothing seems to be working, and yet we come and we say, oh, electricity will jumpstart growth, economic growth. So it looks like nothing seems to work around here.
Yeah, Dr. Abati, you are dealing with the symptoms of already a very badly managed reform. Between 2015 and 2023, there was no intellectual or even policy discussion about reform. There was an effort to make sure that everybody receives the signal that the Goodluck administration failed on power. But what about Nigerians? What about us? So you can make a political argument, but what about the citizens? Can't you sit down and look at what was right in that journey and change this or change that? Let me tell you, everywhere else, Mexico, all of them, I don't want to keep calling names, privatization runs in waves. There's a first wave which was conducted by Jonathan. The second wave was available for anybody who is interested in moving us forward, that will come and see that some of the disco territories are too unwieldy. For instance, Port Harcourt Electricity Distribution Company has almost 5 states there. It's impossible for them to be expected to be that efficient. So the laws are there for somebody to come in and unbundle and take away 4 or 5 states, 4 states or 3 states, leave the balance with the original winner of the bid, and new money is coming. Even from these new monies, we can pay some of these legal debts that have spiraled out of because of the liquidity crisis. You look at the Enugu Distribution Company, you see about 4 states. There is no need. The laws are there to say, okay, you won the bid, you keep this state, you have first right of refusal, you pick this, the other ones we are putting them out on bid. These are the things that the regulator does, not ministry. The regulator is owner of the market. He makes the market. But he cannot do it when he's saying yes sir every day to the minister. He goes to report there and take instruction. That was not the design of the reform. But 2015, I could almost go ahead to say that certain forces tried to reverse the reform through the back door by running a different program. Now we are facing the consequences. The current president is interested in solving it. It's sincere. It's not a political thing. It's sincere, he's interested. But he has to solve it by owning it, changing the dimension of his closeness to how the problem is solved. He cannot continue to outsource it to political hands, because each of them will see opportunities in it rather than mission. There's a difference between opportunity for me and a mission for Nigeria. So this is the challenge we're facing. A lot of people will not talk about it, but I will talk about it. Because he is interested, but I don't see the ownership, the level of ownership that will make sure that things don't go without him noticing it very early. I don't see that model. And I've said that before.
As we begin to wrap up, let me ask you about the national grid. Yeah, people talk about infrastructure, it's old, it's poorly maintained. But those who know the subject have suggested that, look, we can adopt modern technology. We can decentralize the grid. We can have off-grid technology. Are these options impossible? And then how do we deal with the problem of sabotage? All these Nigerians who go and steal electricity cables, even from high-tension wires, high tension installations as it happened once, or those who, because government has not succeeded with metering, connect directly and they get away with it. Because there's also a human desperation fueled side of this problem. How do you deal with that as we begin to wrap up?
Thank you. I think, number one, when you talk about whether the sector, why is the sector not modernizing? Why is technology not playing a role in how transmission, for instance, happens or how distribution happens? Everybody will tell you that it's the right way to think, but how you think and how you fund it are two different things. We have a situation that is already burning with us, burning the system up, of a dysfunctional relationships, not one, in the sector. Somebody needs to pull it back and say, listen, I can deliver this change, but this is the route I will take. And by so time, I'll get it. I can't see the journey plan. And I've said this several times. People think I'm just being, judgmental. But you have to see a journey plan and you can commit to it. When you talk about vandalism, I can tell you for effortlessly, Dr. Abati, it's one of the Nigerian stories and excuses for failure, where the same elements that they are vandalizing, not exactly the same, are similar in the telecom. How many times have they vandalized telecom as an excuse for failure? But this is a system that is dysfunctional, is not performing, and is looking for every excuse around, every reason to say this or not to say this. But the system itself is in a very poor state. It needs to be pulled out of that pit, and a new journey has to start. But somebody must own it. Somebody should stop talking about it, but must own it and say, in fact, if the president, our current president, decides that all I want to stop is grid collapse, that I'm not interested in even 1 more megawatts on the grid. I'm not interested. But this one that we have should never collapse again. You will see a program that will be laid out technically, financially, with the dependencies, and I just want to deliver that for Nigerians and go away. It is not impossible. Even the best experts in the industry will tell you it's not impossible. But we have to commit to something and then begin to own it and deliver it. We're not doing enough for that, especially in the power sector. And just like, this Boko and all those kind of things. After a while, the problem becomes an avenue for economic benefits for people. And so the problem going away will inconvenience them. Let the problem stay. They continue to dance around it. It never goes. That's what we did for so many years before 2010. The same, all the utilities were there, run by government, stories every year, budgets every year, but the same megawatts every year. Okay. No accountability.
Okay, on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Engineer Beks, Dagogo-Jack, for joining us on the program.